So welcome everybody to Neuroscience of Self-Change. My name is Gabija Toleikyte, as Ilma has mentioned. And the seminar is in English not because I can't speak Lithuanian anymore. Like I lived abroad for quite many years, but I still hopefully I can speak quite okay in Lithuanian still. So we've done the warm-up. So first of all, actually, before we get started, how about we get really clear, why did you come here today? What would you like to get out of today? Okay, and this is a forced volunteering toy. It means that when I throw it, the person who catches it has to answer my question, okay? So why did you come here today, Ignace?
I just work here, you know.
Okay, what would you like? Well, I had no choice. What would you like to get out of today?
Would learn some maybe secret tricks how to make my mind work better.
Okay, secret tricks to make the mind work better. And anybody else would like to share? Real volunteers?
I knew it was me. Well, I also work here. Oh, here's a question.
Yeah.
What would I like to get out of it? Maybe learn something about myself that I didn't know. You know, just discover something, some ideas that would help me understand myself better.
Okay, understand yourself better. Yeah. Wonderful. Who else? Anybody has a different agenda for today?
Hello, I don't work here.
Hi.
I would really want to get from the part of thinking about the change or the idea of what should be changed to actually how to start.
Okay, perfect. So understanding yourself, making the mind work better, and creating a change. And these are actually, interestingly, these are the topics of today, if you already knew the agenda. So first of all, we'll start it all, how do we perceive the world? How do we actually understand what's going on around us? Secondly, how do we remember things? And I'll show you how actually we can't really trust our memory that much. Then we'll talk how we build the model of the world. And is my model of the world the same as yours, or is it different? Then we'll discuss how we form identity and sense of self. And can we actually change? You know, if you heard, like there is, in my town where I'm from, like there was always saying like, oh, you know, he's just like that, you know, you can't change him anymore. And I keep hearing that like all over this saying, and is that true? Can we actually change? And if so, what's needed actually for us to change? Okay, and at the end I'll dedicate the last 10 minutes for questions and any other discussions. However, if you do have questions during the seminar, if something is really like not clear to you, or you really need to get the question answered so to understand the remaining part better, feel free to raise your hand and I'll take your question when the time is right, okay? So very briefly about me, raise your hands if you already know something about me. Raise your hand if you'd like to learn more about me. Okay, so I'm a neuroscientist by training. I worked in neuroscience labs for about 10 years. And during my PhD, I realized that I'm not as nerdy as I thought I was. I realized that I like working with people. I prefer to be working with people instead of being in the dark room on my own. And I did my PhD in London. That's where I still live right now. And then I realized that, you know, in neuroscience, there are so many wonderful insights about how our mind works. And most of them are being kept in the neuroscience community. But the problem is that a lot of neuroscientists are really bad at communicating neuroscience findings to the society, to people who are not scientists. And then actually after I acquired business coach qualification, and I worked as a coach at university, helping people mainly to change their jobs or to change problems in the jobs. And then I realized when I started sharing neuroscience insights, I realized how much people were actually benefiting from it. And that became my biggest passion actually, sharing neuroscience insights with non-scientists in order to help to solve problems. And whatever problems are. And I've been doing that actually, as you can see, in quite a wide range of areas. I deliver a neuroscience course for teenagers in England in different schools. I deliver a lot of seminars for banks, for consulting companies, for, what else do I do? For data management companies. I lecture at university. I do a lot of public talks as well. And my seminars range, from understanding yourself to having good relationships to leadership and so on. So today is one of those seminars. Could I ask, by the way, somebody to open more windows? It's getting really, really hot here, as so many of us. So why did I actually? Why do I feel so strongly about sharing neuroscience insights to society? So first of all, welcome to your brain. This is how your brain looks like. This is the actual real-size brain. If you want, I can send through. This is the size of your brain right now. You can just send through. So by the way, you can split it in two. You can also kick it, but don't kick it just now. So the brain up there, and this is like kind of maintains the structure of the brain as this model does. However, this brain is dead. It's taken out of that person. And this is how your brain looks like now on the left-hand side. What's the difference between those two? Anybody would like to point out the difference? Yeah, go on.
I didn't hear a question.
What's the difference between image on the left and image on the right?
I don't know. It's dead.
Yeah. How can you tell? Yeah, go on.
No blood functional, right?
Just a second. Yeah, non-functional.
Yeah, it's not functional.
How can you tell that?
Because it's dead.
Yeah, okay. Blood, exactly. So in this image, you can see these red things are blood vessels of the brain. So for your brain to function, you need oxygen, glucose, and activity, mental activity. Now, why the brain is important? So first of all, the brain is the organ where all of your biggest dreams take place. Brain is the organ where all your talents are located as well. Brain is also the place where all of your feelings happen as well. Now, remember the day when you were really, really stressed. And actually, stress originated in your brain. Remember the day when you were so excited, the happiest you've ever been. Try to remember now. Just remember the day when you've been really, really, really happy, ecstatic. And that feeling was created in your brain as well. All of your plans for future take place in the brain. So everything we do, everything we think, and everything we feel is born in the brain. Now, just briefly how it functions. First of all, brain has many, many different parts responsible for different functions. And that's called brain specialization. Now, those parts can be grouped into the three main clusters, which developed at the different times in terms of evolution. And also, if anybody has children, also these parts develop in that order in children as well. So the most ancient structure, which is located is continuation of your spine, and it goes just a little bit up there. It's in the gray and red color in this image. Is called lizard brain. And lizard brain is the brain structure which enables you to stay alive. So that brain structure controls your breathing, controls your digestion, and controls your heartbeat. And that happens automatically. We don't need to think about it. We don't need to do anything. So right now, if you had lunch already, your lizard brain is taking care of digesting it. You don't need to think to pace your heart or to change your breathing. Now, another complex of the brain called mammal brain or limbic system, that's where our feelings and habits are located. So mammal brain is actually quite synonymous with the subconscious mind. This brain structure doesn't produce thoughts as such. It produces insights, such as as you call gut feelings or emotions. But we can't really rationally control it. And that's the brain area actually where our fears are being born as well. And that's the brain area with which we fall in love with somebody we fall in love with. And that's the brain area also where we have our routines. So for example, the ones who work here, raise your hands. The ones who, okay. So on the way to, do you need to think how to get into work in the mornings? Or is it quite automatic process by now?
Yeah, I do since I travel from Kona. So
What's that?
I travel from Kona, so I have to think.
Oh, okay. Well, the ones who come. Okay, so for you use different brain area for that. Now, who actually has that quite automatic? Yeah, Ignas. Okay, so Ignas is using that as a kind of a mammal brain. to get here. He doesn't need to think about it. It's quite automatic. And he can, while do you drive a car?
Yes.
Yeah. So when Ignas is driving a car, he can plan his day, he can do whatever he wants to do, you know. So he can listen to the music, have a conversation on the phone, and do other things. Now, for the people who are coming here the first time, probably you need to focus full on it. And for that, actually, you're using different brain structures. It's called neocortex or the human brain. So this is the newest edition of the brain. Where's the Albert brain model is there? I'll show you in a minute. And that's the only brain area which enables us to create a change. By the way, I've forgotten to mention, if somebody has a phone and doesn't like dancing, I would recommend to switch the sound off, because I have a rule in my seminars: if the phone is ringing, you'll need to stand up on your chair and dance for us for a little bit. Actually, people do. I've been giving a lot of seminars for teachers and school principals, and you know, like you'd be surprised. They quite enjoyed dancing. And that's human brain is also the area which enables us to perceive the world around us, and we'll discuss about it a little bit more now. But that's also actually the brain area which now enables me to talk, which enables you to learn new information. Hopefully you'll hear a lot of new things today. And this is, you need to use that area to actually understand it and to remember it. That area is also the only brain area which enables us to collaborate with one another. Mammal brain also enables us to form relationships, but those relationships are really, really selfish. Because mammal brain is only interested in taking the best care of yourself. And when we are under control of mammal brain, we are all selfish. Now, when we use our human brain, that's the third complex of the brain. I know it's quite confusing because human brain and substructure is called human brain, but it's just part of our brain. And with that structure, we can fully understand the other person. We can really empathize. We can really think of what the other person needs, and with that we can collaborate. And that's also the structure where our personality is as well. Now, speaking of the personality, there is one brain structure is particularly important in that, and that's called frontal lobes, which is just there at the front in blue. Now, if you put your hands on your forehead and put your hands like this, yeah, if you do that, so you cover your frontal lobes. So frontal lobes is the largest part of your brain, and that's the part which enables you to make good decisions, to be rational, to logically think, to basically in your job. Most of you in your job, you use majority of your frontal lobes to do the tasks. Now, at the very, very, very front of it, called prefrontal cortex, that's where your personality is. And there is quite a few cases in history where people actually damage that area, and that area is not very hard to damage, by the way. And I tell you about one case. Raise your hands if you heard about Phineas Gage. Yeah, perfect. A couple of you. So Phineas Gage was a railway worker. He was a very, very reliable man. He had a family, he had a couple of children, he had a loving wife, and he was a very, very loving and nice man. He was like one of those exemplary citizens. And he was leading a small team. He was a manager there, and people really liked him. Now, one day, he was working alone, and he was performing the explosion of the certain stretch of the railway. And unfortunately, the explosion didn't happen as he predicted. Part of the metal, which he's holding here in his hand, flew up and actually crossed his jaw through there, went through his eye, and went through the front of his skull. And you can see the reconstructions of that on the left-hand side, and the metal pieces in red. So what do you think happened to Phineas Gage? Any ideas? Raise your hands if you think he died. No? Yeah. Maybe it's like in the coffin, you know, buried with it. Okay. In fact, he didn't die. Not only he didn't die, he stood up, he walked 2-3 miles to the hospital, he administered himself to the hospital, said like, come on guys, do something about it. He could still talk, he could still breathe, he could still do most of the things. Okay, because in fact his lizard brain and his mammal brain was not damaged. One part of his human brain was damaged, in fact, and that part was called prefrontal cortex. What happened to Phineas? After they removed this metal rod from his brain, he became a completely different person. He was no longer reliable. He was very, very spontaneous and impulsive. So he was walking through the village, and he was either threatening to beat people, or he was trying to have sex with everybody. So he could no longer suppress his impulses. As they were writing at that time, the damage evoked his animalistic nature. So prefrontal cortex is the area which suppresses our urges and actually gives the context, like if right now, if you don't really like what I'm wearing right now, for example, you won't, shout, hey, like you have an ugly dress, right? You would suppress those thoughts. And Phineas Gage would not be able to do that even physically. And in fact, for little children, like toddlers, like 3 to 7-year-olds, they can't really suppress their thoughts either. And a lot of times they say things, really funny things. And because in fact the prefrontal cortex is not yet fully developed. And a lot of times when little kids have their tantrums, when you take them to the shop and they start to scream, I want it, I want it, I want it. It's not because they're kind of being spoiled brats. Maybe some of them are. But because actually they can't really suppress their desires. And they can't really they can't think that much in future. They are very much in this moment, and they need it now. Okay, so not only he became a really angry and very, very kind of dangerous to the society, he also lost the mojo. He wasn't motivated about anything. Life was quite a miserable place for him. Nothing was giving lots of pleasure for him. And he was, in a lot of times, he was feeling quite lethargic, quite tired, and quite fed up of everything. And you don't even need actually the metal rod to cross your head to get such an effect. So the most common actually case for suppression of your prefrontal cortex is depression. Like when I work with the career coaching clients, or when I work with corporate world, but there is a lot of people who are in the jobs they don't really like that much. After many years in the position they are not happy, getting depressed is very, very normal state. Or when people are in their relationships which are not working for them, it's very common for the brain to get depressed. In fact, I think, in my opinion, depression is not a disease. It's a very, very normal state for the brain to get into when we are in the state which is not very good for us, when we're in the situation which is not working for us. So when we are depressed, actually prefrontal cortex is also suppressed. And I get clients saying to me, I'm no longer the person I used to be. And if you think of anybody whom you know who is depressed, they really change their personality. Or if either of you has been depressed in the past or are depressed now, you probably know what I'm talking about. Okay, so what are the things prefrontal cortex is responsible for? I mentioned already, it's very, very important area to do your job well, and to study and to learn and to keep on changing, keep on improving. And that's the primarily the only area which is actually capable to create a lasting change. Now, when we come up with New Year's resolutions, we can only make them happen with our prefrontal cortex. Mammal brain and lizard brain won't help us with it. Yeah, and this is the area, by the way, also where our sense of self is, where our internal values are, where our motivations are. And this area, you can throw it. Been practicing. And this area is also why we all actually have very, very different ideal jobs. Like I've been working with a few hundred clients now with a career transition, and there isn't two clients alike. Everybody has really, really individual profile of what things drives them. And that's because actually every one of us has very different prefrontal cortex. Now, if we talk about perceiving the world, we use other parts of human brain. And there is four different lobes colored in different colors here, which actually they are like departments responsible for different functions. So area in the front, as we discussed, it enables us actually to speak and to do the physical movements and our personality and all the rational thought. Now, area in the top enables us to read, to understand the speech, to feel sensations. Area at the back enables us to see, and the area on the front enables us to hear and to sense the smells. Okay, so and in fact, how do we perceive the world? So first of all, in order for me now to see you, and for you to see me and to see my slides, not only you need that human brain, those areas in different colors I just showed you before, you need this area which for a long time was thought to be very, very boring area, and that's called thalamus. I did my first research project on it, by the way. So thalamus gets information from all of your senses. It gets information from your ears, from your eyes, from your skin, and from your nose. And it kind of thalamus decides, okay, well, if it's visual information, I need to send it to the back. If it's taste, I need to send it to the sides. If it's smell, I need to send it to the sides. And so it's like brain GPS, you know, when brain GP, like brain doctor. When it gets information, it kind of decides where to send it. But now actually, for a long time we thought that thalamus is just a passive system, like almost switching the networks. But now actually we know that it's not the case. So when information comes, so here's, by the way, the brain from the side is a brain slice, and here's your eye. This laser doesn't work on there, but I'll show you with my fingers. So when for you now to see my slides, you get information to the retina of your eye, and it's sent through the optic nerve to the one part of thalamus called LGN, or lateral geniculate nucleus. And from there, it sends information to your visual cortex at the very back of your head. But more importantly, actually, there is about 9 times more connections going back to thalamus. So in fact, we don't really see information passively. Our visual cortex tells to thalamus, okay, search for people faces. Look, you know, search how are people happy or not, for example. And then thalamus pre-filters, and it primarily focuses attention on people's faces. If you are shopping for a dress, and you're in the shop, and there is a lot of different objects in the shop, our visual cortex, our human brain says, like, you know, search for whatever, red dress. And it actually pre-filters everything and searches for the dress. So actually, now what we know actually that we don't really see everything in our surrounding. We see actually things we search for, and that's called perceptual bias. And we are always very, very biased actually, because we never perceive the world as it is. We always perceive the world actually based on what the tasks we ask for them to search for. I give you an example. When I get the clients who are in the jobs they hate, they say, like, everybody hates their jobs, don't they? What's happening there? Anybody would like to guess? Yeah?
Someone who hates the job, he looks for the negative sides of the job.
Yeah, exactly. So they send to the thalamus a task. Find other people who hate the jobs, right? And of course, our brain is called affective expectations. Our brain always finds what it searches for. Okay? Now let's imagine scenario that you want to start your own business, and you're really, really scared. You're scared maybe to bankrupt. You're scared, you know, to kind of have no money to pay your rent. Okay? So what the task do you send to your thalamus?
Search for another business that got to the bankruptcy.
Yeah, exactly. Search for other cases where business failed, and I get clients all over again trying to prove to me it's impossible to start a business in London if you don't have X amount of money. And I tell them, okay, how about you give your thalamus different task? Search for people. By the way, vibration also counts for dancing. That's a new rule, so from now on. And then they start searching for that. Again, I get also sometimes people come to me because they've been in very, very painful relationships for many years, and they want to stop it. You know, they want to kind of change the game. And they go from one relationship to another, creating the same thing. And they say, like, what things could they say? Of course, all men are selfish, or all women are selfish. Okay? So with that belief, what they send to thalamus that, okay, all men are selfish, and expecting that, or all women are selfish, you know, the same could apply. and they go and find exactly another selfish person, and they create a relationship with another selfish person. Now imagine anybody's a bit broody these days, like noticing babies everywhere. Raise your hands. No? Okay, it's me. Nice. So people who really like kind of are in the time when they decide, okay, I want to have a little child. When they go to the street, what do they notice in the street? Babies everywhere, right? Like my friends even laughed. They were like, where do you find all these babies, you know? Like, and now anybody who is searching for a relationship, they go to the street and they notice all the handsome man or handsome, beautiful ladies, right? So we constantly give the task to our thalamus. And however, we're not aware of that process. And a lot of times it gets in the way for us. So if you are not happy with what you've been creating in your life, just ask, what the task am I giving to my thalamus? Because inevitably that's what you're filtering your vision and all of your other senses for. Okay, so and our brain never is constantly guessing on the previous experiences. If you for example been in the with people who actually are being selfish, you've been thinking, oh, everybody is selfish based on the past experiences, and that happens naturally. Okay. So now just to illustrate that, I show you a few optical illusions. So which of those circles is larger, the one on the right or the one on the left? Do they look the same though? No. Okay, so that's called, yeah, so since you know that these are optical illusions, so I'm giving you a little bit of a hint. So the one on your right looks significantly larger. Why is that?
We always compare with the surroundings.
Exactly, so that's a context effect. So imagine, and by the way, they showed also with the psychological studies, if you go out with other people who are as beautiful as you are, you're less likely to succeed to find a partner. Okay? If you go out with the people who are similar to you, and that's important, they have to be similar to you, but a little bit less beautiful, you're much more likely to succeed with finding a partner. Okay, so they are the same size. However, even knowing that, when looking at it, it still looks actually larger, doesn't it? Now, what about these nuns in the cathedral? Are they the same size or different size? Raise your hands if you think they're the same size. Raise your hands if you think that the ones at the back there are much, much larger. Raise your hands if you're confused and you don't want to participate. Okay, good. So actually, these are all the same size as well. However, that's also context of the distance. This is a photoshopped image, by the way. So if those nuns were actually in that distance, they would look much, much smaller. Okay, and I'll tell you in a minute why it's important for us to guess the actual size. Now, in terms of color, okay, which of those squares is darker? The one on the top or the one on the side? Raise your hands if you think the one on the top. Raise your hands if you think the one on the side. Raise your hands if you think they're the same. A confused group? There's always a few. In fact, actually, if I cover with the white sheets of paper the context, they actually look the same, don't they? But even when I go back, the one on the side looks orange and the one on the top looks brown. And that's again context illusion, because the one on the side is in the shadow. Yeah? And we know what happens. I'll give you the slides you can cover. You don't believe me, do you? Yeah. I give you the slides. Okay, I'll send you the slides. By the way, all of you will receive the slides afterwards. Okay, so the one actually on the side looks much, much lighter because of the shadow. Because when things are in the shadow, the color looks darker. Now, why is it important for us to actually know the actual size and actual color? I give you a little hint. Now, in this picture, try to spot a predator. Raise your hands if you spotted a predator. Can you see that? Okay, now all of you are dead by now. Okay? How about now? Yeah? So actually, color is very, very important for us to distinguish potential dangers out there. And there is one hypothesis, evolutionary hypothesis of why our brain developed, is that, our brain actually seemingly hasn't changed as much since 10,000 years ago, when we lived in the bushes, really. We had small communities and we were hunters and gatherers. And for us it was extremely important when we are hunting or gathering berries and mushrooms and whatnot, to spot was there any danger. And the ones who weren't very successful at it, they didn't survive and they didn't leave their genes for the future. Okay, now, by the way, another thing is that our brain also seems to be really, really tuned to recognize faces, to a point, to a ridiculous extent, that actually we start seeing faces and bodily shapes even in inanimate objects. So I'll show you some examples. Okay. Plain one. Okay, so for our survival, it was also very, very important to recognize people. And in the brain, there is even particular neurons. They're called face neurons. And when we record from the brain, for example, when you look at your mom, certain kinds of, one group of neurons will be active. When you look at Jennifer Lopez, other neurons will be active. When you look at Brad Pitt, actually they even found Jennifer Lopez and Brad Pitt neurons in monkeys. And interestingly, if you merge the pictures together, they would activate actually different neurons altogether. So for our survival, it seems to have been very, very important to, first of all, when you're imagine when you were a baby. Oh, sorry, I skipped a little bit too far. It was very, very important to recognize, is the person approaching me my mom, my dad, or potential stranger? And if it was a stranger, you do what? Cry, shout, scream if needed, right? So to alarm that you might be in danger. Another way to actually let us know if we are in danger is emotions. And emotions, when we say there is good emotions and bad emotions, in my opinion and from the neuroscience point of view, there isn't such a thing. All emotions are extremely, extremely important. And emotions are just the brain's, actually mammal brain, way to communicate to us. When something is very good for our survival, we feel nice emotions, such as love, excitement, joy. When something is pleasure, when something is not very, is potentially harmful for our survival, we feel fear, we feel stress, we feel anger, we feel sadness, we feel disgust. And when we feel different emotions, we also perceive the world very, very differently. So imagine situation when, imagine if, raise your hands if you ever had a breakup in your relationship. Yeah? Now imagine, remember, go back to that time. And imagine you went out to the street. What are you noticing in the street? Anybody? Couples? Maybe you always see that person everywhere. I have one of my clients, the same, she unfortunately lost her husband, and she sees her husband everywhere. People similar to her husband, or people who wear similar jackets, everywhere. Okay, what else do you notice? Anybody would like to shout out?
Sad people.
What's that?
Sad people.
Sad people. Or you notice other reasons to be sad about. A lot of times when people go through either relationship breakups or difficult stretches in their career, they also actually notice that their life is pretty shit. They're like, oh, I'm this, I'm like that, and maybe I'm not achieved enough. Maybe my relationship with my family is not that great. So actually, in that state, in the sad state, our brain kind of tells to the thalamus, okay, find other reasons to be sad about. And it actually changes our memories and pre-selects our memories, because we never ever remember everything all at once. We had in the past happy events and we had sad events. So if in the breakups, usually people actually not only grieve this breakup, but a lot of times they grieve all the other losses they had in the past. And that's why, as the years go by, usually people experience breakups more difficultly or with more emotions. So just to sum up, actually, we never ever perceive the world as it is. We perceive the world as we are, based on the tasks we give to our brain, to our thalamus to search for, and also based on the emotions we are feeling currently. Now the same applies with memory. Raise your hands if you trust your memories. I think you're very good at memories. Raise your hands if you think, sometimes with some memories I trust. Confused group? Okay, good. I love that we have 3 groups here. So in terms of the memory, just let me tell you very, very briefly the process. So right now, as I'm sharing with you some information, if you're paying attention, but only if you're paying attention, you're actually putting that information in the sensory memory. Okay? If you don't pay attention, if you, for example, are sitting in the lecture and checking your phone, or if you are thinking about something else, you don't hold the information in the sensory memory, and in fact, it doesn't get encoded anywhere else either. Now let's imagine you pay attention, so it gets in your sensory memory, and information which was not attended to gets lost. Now, after that, sensory memory is very, very short, like 30 seconds to 1 minute. Now, if you once you paid attention, and if that information was interesting to you, or evoked certain emotions, or evoked certain thoughts, then you actually move that memory to the short-term memory. And short-term memory stays in our minds from half an hour to a few hours. Okay? And if that information, if you leave the seminar and still think about it, and maybe you're walking with somebody else you met here today, and you start discussing, I can't believe my thalamus does that to me, or whatever, that information actually gets encoded stronger and stronger. Okay? And then it gets actually into the long-term memory. Now, in each of those stages, we never actually remember things as they happened, because we perceived only a small fraction of it. And in fact, memories are constantly changed as they actually go from one stage to another. And why does that happen? So first of all, our brain's task is not to store information as it is to store the information which would help us to survive, and also which is meaningful to us. So if certain episodes of the lecture today created some emotions in you, or some thoughts, you'll remember those episodes much, much better than others. And they'll be scaled up in your brain, in your memory, than others. Especially if you disagree with something, then you'll encode those better. So it's good to turn your critical thinking on. But also if you go to, let's imagine now, let's take scenario to a birthday party. Let's imagine you go to a birthday party. And what's your name, for example?
Joanna.
Joanna. We go to Joanna's birthday party, right? When is it?
On 21st of August.
Okay, on 21st of August, everybody, okay? We go to Joanna's birthday, okay? Now let's imagine we have really great time, and somebody maybe gets a bit too drunk and breaks the window or does something, right? And then we leave. If we leave in a good mood, what we will remember? We'll remember that it was a great party, and we give our thalamus and our other area, actually called hippocampus, which is responsible for memory, to find all the reasons why it was a great party. Okay? Now let's imagine I had a really good time, and at the end of it, Joanna insulted me. She said something to me what really felt like really painful to me. And I leave, and how I remember the party? Anybody?
Like a disaster.
Yeah, so I searched all the other reasons why the party wasn't that good. I said, this guy broke the window, and people maybe weren't as interesting as I thought they would be. Maybe cake wasn't that delicious, actually, after all, and so on and so forth, right? And the same, actually, not only, just a second, I'll take it in a second, not only we actually change what parts of the memory we pick out based on our emotions, but also it can be changed later on. So imagine, first scenario, I left in a great mood. And then I'm very good friends with Joanna, let's imagine. We met just first time, but let's imagine. And then one day, we get into the argument with Joanna. And we fall out of our friendship with her. And then looking back at all the actually encounters we had in the past, I update them and modify them to match the current reality. It could be that Joanna was a very giving and very wonderful, loyal friend to me. But if I fell out with her, I won't be likely to remember those events. I'll remember the events when she didn't have time to meet up, when she maybe was maybe sad and not interacting with me that much, and so on and so forth. And that particular, very good example is actually breakups. When we go through breakups, what do we remember? We remember all the times why this guy or this lady was bastard, right? And we find, and then when we start missing them, what do we remember? All the good things, it was amazing. What was I thinking? Okay, so our memory is actually never reliable. We always adjust our memory to match our reality, our current thinking. Okay, and emotions and perception, even though they happen in different areas of the brain, those areas are connected. So emotions change both our perception and what things we bring up from the memory bank, and also how we remember things. Okay, and we remember the same events very, very differently if we go there, if we are happy or if we're saddened during those events. Now let's take, we already have very biased perception of the world, of the situation. Our memory is also very biased. So inevitably, the model we build up of the world is very, very different from person to person. And what do I mean by model? In the model of the world, we have beliefs around, for example, what it is like to be human, what it is like to be a woman, what it is like to be successful in career, what it is like to be a good daughter or good son, what it is like to be a good partner. And everybody has very, very different concepts around that. And a lot of times in communication, problems happen when we assume the other person thinks exactly the same as I do. And that's very normal kind of guess we make all the time, okay? And in fact, so first of all, our brain constructs the model, which based on our past experiences, and based on what helped us to survive up to this day. So it's never a reliable model. It's always just based on what things you went through and how you experienced them. And also not only what experiences you had, but also how you interpreted them. Okay, I give you an example. Let me just. Okay, I tell you about my friend Maria. And for her, she's been going through some difficult times, and she has a little bit more pessimistic tendencies. And no matter what happens, she takes things very, very personally. Okay, so imagine her bank account got blocked. Okay, when it used to be back in the day, if you used your bank account, bank card abroad, it would get blocked sometimes, right? And imagine Maria's bank card got blocked, and she would say, of course, it always happens to me. Okay, so her model is that I'm perhaps a loser. Okay, and bad things always happen to me, as actually that blockage of the bank card had nothing to do with her. It's just a procedure they go through. Okay, and also it kind of in the model we put how we remember things. So our model is always very, very different. So each of us has completely different model from one another. Okay, is now if we go to the. Oh, by the way, you had a question.
That's fine.
Yeah, or the comment. Okay, we'll have some time later on for questions. Just we'll go through the theory first. Now let's imagine how. Let's look how our brain develops and how our personality develops. Our sense of self is part of our model as well. So this is my beautiful niece Clara. And as for her brain to develop as it is developing now, she's about to turn 2 years in February. First of all, the first starting point is genes. We all come to this world with very, very different genes. And that gives a already different start for each of us. For a long time, though, we thought that, you're born as you're born and you can do nothing about it. Now we know that that's not true. That, in fact, genes are important. However, your experiences change which genes are being used and which are not being used. And that's called epigenetic modifications. And our experiences, both change a lot of things. So first of all, in our experiences, how you perceive things, how you remember them, how you interpreted them, and what actions you took already gives very, very different development to your brain. And that's, in neuroscience point of view, is called activity-dependent plasticity of the brain. So our brain is always very plastic and changing based on the experiences we had. Now, how the change is taking place in the brain. So imagine the brain actually for everybody looks more or less the same. It doesn't look that different if you just look at the actual gross structure. However, at a much more cellular level, the brain is very, very different for every one of us. So first of all, brain consists of many, many neurons. Somebody estimated there is 86 billion neurons. And these are the cells which contain information. And those cells communicate with one another via small electricity and small chemicals. Now, neurons are not just floating about there in the brain individually. They are connected in the networks. And those networks, they're connected for a specific reason. So for example, right now, to watch this presentation and to listen to it, you're activating the blue network, and you're using the neurons at the back to see the slides. You're using the neurons on the side to hear what I'm talking. You're using the neurons up here actually to see the letters and to be able to read them and to see the images. And then you use the neurons in the front to think about the concepts and to critically assess. Is it interesting? Is it not? Is it valid for me? Is it not? As I'm talking, I'm using the red network. So I'm both, first of all, I'm talking, so these neurons there. Secondly, I'm hearing, what if you have any questions or what things you share with me. And I'm using my prefrontal cortex. For example, I'm really thirsty right now, but I'm using my prefrontal cortex to suppress my thirst, and also to think what am I going to talk about next. And each thought has certain neural network to it, or sometimes a few neural networks. So just to think that I am in this room, I activate certain neural network. To be able to walk, I'm activating many different neural networks. To feel, raise your hands if you can feel anger, if you know how to feel anger. Yeah? So in fact, in order to feel that, you need to activate anger networks in your brain. And now when we are activating certain networks, the more times we use them, the stronger they become. It's a bit like a muscle in that regard. So if you've been, activating your anger network many times in the past, you're more likely to get angry in the other situations too. If you consider yourself as optimistic person, it means that you've been activating optimism networks in your brain, and hence you actually, for you, it's the easiest state to be is being optimistic and positive. If you've been, thinking about numbers all the time and speculating numbers, for you that these networks are much, much stronger as well. And in fact, these networks, called brain highways, they define our emotional landscape. So some people, let's do a little survey. So for example, raise your hands if you feel stress quite very often during the day. Okay, so you have brain highways for the stress. Raise your hands if you feel joy every day. Okay, so you have joy highways in your brain. Raise your hands if you feel fear quite often. You have probably fear and anxiety networks in the brain. Raise your hands if you think about other people first before thinking about yourself. If you're like really giving and caring person, so you have those kind of networks as brain highways in your brain. So what is personality then? So personality is the habits we practiced most often, and the networks which we train to be the brain highways. That's where the most default ways of being turn out to be. And in our personality, actually, our past experiences are encoded as well. So if you take a little baby and you raise it in one kind of family, in really loving and caring and giving family, the baby feels safe, the baby will develop one kind of personality. Now, if you raise that baby in the dysfunctional family for one or another reason, then the baby would have very, very different personality. And in fact, there is many, many studies showing that. And also okay, so brain highways is one of those. And also, when we are developing our personality, we kind of give the task. So, for example, if I'm an optimistic person, I give a task to my thalamus to find all the reasons to be happy for. And it always finds. If I'm a pessimistic person, I always find the reasons to be negative about things as well. So, in fact, we use that system, as I mentioned in the past, to actually maintain our personality as well. And we always can find what we search for. And the network and this so given that mechanism, as the years go by, people become more and more into their personality and harder to change for that very reason, because those networks are becoming stronger and stronger and stronger. Okay, so actually, can we change? Do we have time for that part? Yeah, we do. So I will actually share with you five kind of insights based on if you want to change, can you change? But before that, actually, what about we do a little interactive task? So if you turn to your neighbor and share with your neighbor, what would you like to change in your life? Okay, just very, very briefly. I'll give you 1 minute for that. Ready, set, go. So who would like to share what would they like to change? You can either share what you want to change or what your new friend wants to change, if you want to stay anonymous with your thing. What would you like to change?
My car and my girlfriend.
Okay, your car and your girlfriend at the same time, or is it the same thing? Or the same thing? Okay, perfect. Anybody wants a boyfriend from people here? Okay. With a new car? Okay, what else? Anybody wants to share?
Okay, so I broke up, something
Recently.
and I got in my lizard brain.
Yeah.
I think so I want to get out of there.
Brilliant, that's a very, very good thing. Get out of there in order to feel a bit better, right? Yeah. Anybody would like to feel a bit better than they feel normally, in general, for one or another reason, raise your hands. Perfect. Okay, anybody else would like to share?
My colleague said that he would like to find more motivation,
Uh-huh.
and I think it's a common thing for most of people.
Yeah.
And I also would like to change my job because of finding new motivation for new things.
Okay, interesting. So, okay, perfect. Raise your hands if you would like to feel more excitement about your life and about whatever things you do, either in the career or in the hobbies or in relationships, whatever. Okay, so that's also a way of changing. Raise your hands if you want to change your job, your relationship. Raise your hands if you want to quit certain habits, if you want to stop doing certain, like smoking, change your eating, change your exercise habits. Facebook habits, that's very good. Raise your hands if you want to stop procrastinating. Yeah? Okay, so any of it applies. So once you receive the slides, there will be 5 exercises you can do afterwards on your own time to actually work towards it. So first of all, before we jump into the strategy, can we change? So first of all, in order for us to change anything in our life, our brain needs to change first. Can our brain change? Yes, in fact, brain can change, and that's called brain plasticity. So first of all, we can, as adults, for many years we didn't know whether we get new neurons, and that's called neurogenesis. And now there is many studies now showing that actually, in fact, in some brain areas, but not in all, new neurons are being born throughout the life. But more importantly, the neurons we don't use, they die. Okay, so use it or lose it. Also, the connections between neurons keep changing. The ones we use all the time, they become connections between them get stronger and stronger, and the new networks we don't use, they become weaker and weaker over time. Okay, so that keeps changing. And this is the slide for my mom, for example. We keep saying, my mom is, by the way, a very interesting character. She raised 5 children, and she was a kindergarten director, and she graduated a couple of degrees and had a farm as well. And I said, like, Mom, you had really a hard life, so how about you now do only whatever you like play she always wanted to be a pianist. She wanted to learn to play the piano. Like, Mom, we'll get you a piano. You can play the piano and do whatever you like. What does my mom say?
No, I'm too old.
Do you relate to that with your moms? Do you relate to that maybe with your own life? I get clients, sometimes actually 25-year-old, saying, I'm just too old to change things. and in fact, for our brain, it's never ever too late. Ever. Because brain plasticity stays throughout the life. And even in fact, when we actually are changing, constantly changing and learning new things, it's very, very healthy for our brain. Because in such a state, we actually are reducing the risk of neurodegenerative diseases. There are some studies now, preliminary studies showing that. But also actually physical exercise makes our brain more plastic as well. So it's very good to use your lunch breaks or evenings to do exercise, because that makes your brain smarter as well. Now, why is it difficult to change? A lot of times, like we say, okay, the brain can change, but why I saw this beautiful picture. Unfortunately, I don't have flip chart to draw it, but it was like my New Year's resolution for 2017 is to do the New Year's resolutions from 2016, which I decided to do on 2015, which I came up with on 2014, right? And a lot of us keep recycling the New Year's resolutions from this year. Definitely, I'm changing my career, changing my girlfriend, and like doing things very different. I'm gonna eat healthy and do everything completely differently, right? And why that often fails. So first of all, if we remember this Trune brain model, remember lizard brain for survival, mammal brain for emotions and habits, and human brain for changing and learning and making the best decisions. Those three areas of the brain consumes different amounts of energy. And I give you an analogy of different vehicles. Okay? So lizard brain is like a little motorcycle. It's always active, and it consumes quite small amounts of energy. And it's active day and night, non-stop. Because if it stopped, our heart would stop and we would die, basically. Now, mammal brain, is that the car you want?
I have.
I knew it. Maybe in next slide there will be a new girlfriend. So this car is active most of the time when we are on sort of autopilot, When you wake up in the morning, what do you do as the first thing? What do you do, for example, when you wake up in the morning?
Brushing my teeth.
Brush your teeth, right? Do you need to think about it? Yeah, like most of us have automatic. We brush our teeth, or like we make a cup of coffee, or we drink a glass of water with lemon, or whatever habits we have. And that's our mammal brain telling us. We don't need to think. It's very cheap for our brain to perform that task. However, like sometimes in our relationships and our jobs, we're also on autopilot, right? We communicate the same way. We do the things like sometimes without thinking as well. Emotions, habits, and skills also take place there. So for us to be able to walk, for us to be able to cycle, to drive a car, that happens in mammal brain. But only if you're actually like really like automatic with it. When I drive a car, by the way, we have that car as well. When I drive a car, I use human brain. I'm afraid even to blink, But when my partner drives, he's using mammal brain. And so mammal brain consumes medium amount of energy as our DT here, for example. This is just a metaphor, by the way. Now, human brain is much, much, much more expensive. Human brain is like a plane in energy consumption in comparison to other brain areas. And it's only active when we need it, when we pay attention to it, and also when we have enough energy, when we have enough oxygen, enough glucose coming through our blood vessels to those areas. Okay, so it's only active when it's needed. So what happens when we are tired? At the end of the day, like if you work really hard and you come back home really exhausted and you spend then the rest of the time checking Facebook or watching TV, actually, first of all, for the brain, the most important brain complex to take care of is lizard brain. So firstly, it gives blood and glucose with the oxygen to the lizard brain. The second most important is mammal brain. And only if there is some left, it gives to the human brain. And that's why when we come back home tired, even if there is a partner there, we're much more likely to snap when we are tired as opposed to when we are really relaxed and on holidays. Okay, raise your hands if you have children. Actually, by the way, yeah. So if you notice when you come back home, we are much more likely, to kind of slip into the either shouting at the kid or like saying something. We're like, oh damn, why did I say that? Of course, it's not the right thing to say for a kid, right? But when we're tired, we think with mammal brain. We don't have enough energy for human brain. Okay, and in this state we can't make best decisions and we can't learn because we need to have enough energy for the brain to change. So if you want to change whatever you want to change in your life, if you want to change your personality, your career, your relationships, your emotional state, your motivation, first of all, reduce the mental load. Okay, and take quality breaks during your day. And by quality breaks, I don't mean like if you have a lunch in front of your laptop, that doesn't necessarily count as quality break. Actually, interestingly, if you watch the funny videos on YouTube, it counts. If you watch kittens, babies, and silly videos, because when we laugh, actually our blood vessels become wider and more oxygen and glucose is delivered to our human brain. Anything what makes you feel good is a quality break. So for some people, going for a run, going to the gym, for some people, calling a friend, calling mom, could be a quality break. Getting drunk is a short-term solution, and actually, so that's very interesting. So if you're an overthinker, if you think too much about things, getting drunk can work for short-term to reduce number of thoughts. Now, what happens when we get drunk? We have much less thoughts left, but we are much more convinced about them. Okay, that's why drunk people usually, like, if somebody is not drunk, it looks ridiculous what they say. It can work as a short-term solution. On the long term, there is a name for it if we're using that as a solution for too long. Also, another thing which I'm using actually is do the thing you want to do in the morning. So, for example, when I was writing my PhD thesis, the strategy which works for me best, because I was I have a story about it. So with my PhD thesis, I was procrastinating for a year, and I've written it in a month. Okay, but how did I? Because I procrastinated for so long. If anybody is proficient procrastinator, you probably know that. But the longer you procrastinate, the harder it is to stop procrastinating, because you have much more guilt and whatnot, about procrastinating. So then you overplan constantly. Like initially, I would say like I'll write for 2 hours. Next day, like if I procrastinated one day, I'll write for 4 hours, and so on and so forth. So have much more reasons to procrastinate. So actually, I will get to it in the next thing, but actually one thing which worked for me, I said, okay, every morning, no matter what, I write for an hour and a half. That's it, just an hour and a half. And for the rest of the day, I can do whatever I want to do. And a lot of times once I started writing, I would get into the mode, and I couldn't check my phone, I couldn't check emails, I couldn't make a cup of tea, anything, just write. And it really, really worked very, very well for me. I have another method which I can share with you later, which really works. Or if you want to start exercising, doing it as the first thing in the morning. Because if you leave to do it after work, you're much less likely to bail out of it. Also, making a decision to do it in the morning, that also counts. So if you want to go to the gym, in the morning calling your friend and saying, Ignas, at 6 p.m. I'm meeting you there and we're going to the gym together. That really works as well. Okay, so first of all, ask yourself, how could you implement more quality breaks during your day? And that's very, very important. If you don't do that, it's almost impossible to make a change. Because change doesn't happen, if we take a highway, change doesn't happen in the fast lane, never. Change doesn't happen in the middle lane either. And change doesn't even happen in the slow lane. Change actually happens only when we get to the how do you call that little slip road, the side of the highway, the road where actually you can just park in the case of emergency. Only then we can actually create a change. Okay, so now the second point is when we try to change too much. So when people stay in the jobs they hate, and then suddenly they decide, okay, I hated it for so long, I quit my job. Or somebody's been in a relationship for 10 years and they are like, okay, that's it, I stop this relationship. How long have you been with your girlfriend?
7.
Were you filming, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay. So after 7 years, you decide like, okay, I'm I'm changing it. So what happens? Our brain freaks out. Or if somebody never been exercising and decides to exercise 5 times a week, what happens? Like our brain really, really freaks out. So why does that happen? So first of all, when something is completely different to what it used to be, then it activates the brain area called amygdala. Amygdala is part of mammal brain, it's part of limbic system, it's very, very important for emotions. And amygdala, it creates emotions such as fear, anxiety, stress, anger. And that's why people say, like when they, for example, try to be on a very strict diet, they say, like, I don't know why I feel really anxious, like a lot of times they try to, change nutrition, but then afterwards they start smoking, they start drinking or whatever to reduce anxiety. Or they do what? Like they spend maybe, for the first day, they're doing really, really well, they go home, and what do? Binge eat, like everything, donuts, chocolate, whatever is there. And amygdala, why that happens? So not only amygdala creates those emotions, but also, once amygdala is active, it suppresses part of your prefrontal cortex as well. And in that state, we can't make very good decisions, unfortunately. The same happens if somebody's really, really jealous. Or raise your hands if you've been really jealous and said something really stupid to your partner. Okay? And that happened because amygdala was raging, and it suppressed your prefrontal cortex, and it took things completely out of proportion, right? And then we said things we didn't mean to say, because we were talking from mammal brain, not from human brain at all. Okay? So the second thing is actually do whatever you want to change, decide on very, very small first step to do. If you want to start exercising, start with once a week. And very, as gentle as possible. Maybe walk, for extra couple stops instead of taking a public transport or a cab or driving. Or actually, go to the gym once a week and make your friend to go to the gym with you as well. Join a friend who goes to the gym regularly as well. If you want to completely change your nutrition, start with maybe reducing 1 cup of coffee a day. Start with very, very small step. The smaller, the better. Because we want to keep the feeling of familiarity for your brain. Okay? So what are the steps in creating this change, and what's the small step I can change with? If somebody wants to change their emotional well-being, what's the one thing which could help you feel better? Okay, getting drunk is one of them. What else things could help you feel better? Anybody?
Getting a hobby. Like dancing.
Exactly, going dancing, right? What else? Meditation for many people actually helps. What else? Sports. What else? Work. Anybody likes calling the best friend, chatting about it? For many of us, that works as well. Okay, now when we do things we enjoy, and when we do things we hate, our brain functions very, very differently as well. So when we are either stressed or do something we don't like at all, so what could that be for me? Just trying to remember. Oh, I used to hate programming. So during my PhD, I had to develop my own software using Python programming language. And because I was self-taught programmer, I was basically learning as I was creating it. A lot of times I had really stupid bugs, which I didn't know how to resolve. A lot of times the syntax was wrong or something. And I would spend days literally searching for a mistake. And then I would ask my postdoc, Christoph, I was like, well, something is wrong. I spent 2 days. He's like, oh, 1 second, done, And I hated it. I was like, I can't stand it. I didn't like it at all. So when I was, doing searching for the bugs or programming, or doing sometimes when experiments weren't going very well in the lab, when I was doing experiments, I was activating my sympathetic nervous system. A sympathetic nervous system is the system which creates fight or flight response. It's very, very useful if a tiger is attacking you for you to run away. But now in the modern society, that system actually creates a lot of problems for us. When we activate the system, our blood vessels get contracted, and hence our neocortex doesn't get enough oxygen and glucose anymore. So in the sympathetic nervous system, we are really, really, first of all, we are very selfish, every single one of us. When we are tired, stressed, or doing things we don't like, we gradually become more and more selfish. Secondly, we aren't very smart. Okay, full stop. If you try to, imagine when you're driving a car and you get really, really angry. Anybody gets road rage when they drive? Ignan, do you get it?
Yes.
Okay. So Ignas is driving and some bastard, cuts in front of him. Is Ignas a good driver when he gets angry? Not so much anymore. And a lot of accidents happen when we're in that state. And by the way, I cycle in London everywhere, and I had, I don't know, maybe four accidents or something. And all of them happened when I was in a really kind of sad state, or I didn't really get angry as much, but I get kind of a bit sad. And when we get sad, the same happens as well, because our human brain is not functioning as well anymore. Okay, so the third step is actually managing your brain stress response and doing things in the way which is enjoyable to you. If you want to, for example, get fitter, don't do exercise you hate. The only exercise which counts is the one you enjoy. So first of all, what helps you to reduce stress, you can think about it later. And so what happens when we do things we love, or when we're with people whose company we really, really enjoy? And then we activate so-called parasympathetic nervous system. When we activate that system, we release dopamine, and dopamine is brain chemical which makes things feel good, which creates pleasure. So anything you like, if it's delicious food, sport, being with certain people, you like it only because of dopamine. People who don't release dopamine, they feel nothing at all. Okay, and dopamine creates desire to do things over and over again. If you enjoy your job, you release dopamine and you want to do more and more of it. And that's why now more and more companies create the environment where people feel pleasure in their job. And hence they do much better job. But in addition to that, not only we are more motivated, but also we are much smarter in that setting as well. And that happens because brain secretes the other chemical called oxytocin. And oxytocin has quite the opposite effect on blood vessels to adrenaline. It dilutes your blood vessels, makes them much bigger, and then your neocortex gets much more oxygen and glucose. And then you can feed that plane, And we can, in such a state, we're much more likely to create the change. But also, not only we're intellectually the smartest, we also are, much more emotionally and perceptually, we're much more capable as well. And only in that state we can actually truly care about another person. So the fourth one is do things, reward yourself for when you've done things well. By the way, punishment now, from neuroscience perspective, punishment doesn't work. If you do something or don't do something and afterwards you punish yourself inside of your head, say, oh, you stupid, you've done this again, it doesn't work, actually. So instead, reward yourself when things go well, when you put the effort and time into it. And also get clear on the benefits. Why do you want to change this? Even when you think about, for example, if you want to change your emotional state, what would be better for you in your life? If you just start thinking about all the benefits, you will already get in a better state. Okay, and the very last thing before the summary. How long does it take to make a change? Many of you perhaps heard number 21, but actually the answer is it depends. It depends on how complicated your change is. If you're pessimistic and you want to become an optimistic person, that could take up to 3 months of daily practice. If you're exercising 3 times a week and you want to exercise 4 times a week, that could take you 1 week to get used to that. If you don't exercise at all and want to build up to 5 days a week and do triathlons and run marathons, that could take, for your brain to become automatic, might take some time. For changing emotional landscape, also it depends. Immediate change can be created within 10 days. But actually changing your daily emotions could take much longer. Okay, so create a system where this change is being actually awarded and supported for at least 1 month. And if you need, get support, get your friends on board, get your whatever systems on board. Okay, so just to summarize before I take questions. So first of all, brain doesn't construct the model of the world as it is. It actually creates the model in our head which helped us to survive up to this day. And each of us has very different model. And each of us sees the reality very differently. which we often forget, and we guess that other people see it the same way. And this model creates a filter through which we see the world. And hence we get more and more evidence to keep that model. So if you want to change that, if you think your model is a bit outdated, and by the way, in my coaching sessions, that's primarily what I do. I help people to upgrade the models. Today I had a meeting before there, and I was introduced as a person who fixes people's brains. And what I do is actually I fix the models. I really help them to question the models and update the models. Because a lot of times these models are the thing which gets in the way. And these are the things actually which get us stuck in certain emotions, feeling sadness, even grief actually. Okay, and it's very different from person to person. Personality is shaped by many, many different things. Of course, genes, experiences, and habits you practice most often. And change is possible, however, change is often not easy. So it requires first of all, decision to make a change and reduce mental load to create space for that change. Secondly, it requires reducing stress. It requires doing the thing in the gradual steps. And it requires doing things in a fun way. Because when we get too serious and too kind of rigid about it, that's when it's really hard to change. And sometimes it requires support. Okay, so I'm aware I took a couple of minutes longer. So thanks for your attention. I'll take some questions now. That was first.
Yeah, so can you actually block emotions and memories of your brain just to keep them away from your daily life?
Okay, very good question. Yes, you can. The side effect is depression. Depression happens when we try to suppress emotions. Unfortunately, we can't suppress emotions individually. You can't just suppress anger and anxiety and stress. When you suppress those, you suppress happiness and joy and ecstasy and love as well. And in fact, now the emotions is a very, very big topic in neuroscience now. We know that actually we make decisions using our emotions, and we use our rational mind to justify them to ourselves. So actually having those emotions and being aware of them is a very, very useful thing. Because when people block emotions and don't use them in the decision making, that's when they end up in the jobs they hate, in the relationships which are not working, buy the cars they don't like, and things like that. So actually being aware of emotions give you like kind of a very good compass. Because if you're feeling emotions you don't enjoy, it means that something in your life is not quite right. And it's better to be aware of it early on than afterwards, when it's a bit kind of, you're already like devastated and you want to stab yourself in an eye, something. Okay. Anybody else have a question? You had a question.
So it's possible to see the world how it is from your emotion?
Is it possible to see the world as it is? No. The perception of the world is always biased, and your memory is always biased. But as long as we know that, we can actually be much more open-minded to allow other people to see the world as they see. Because then we know, like, I'm not right. Like, there's many, many ways to see this. And this person has different way, and this person has different way.
So why, when you are, in your conscious mind, in your human brain, I don't know, in the cortex, you see the world open-minded, and when you have a lot of stress, it's so easy to get out of it, like you feel changed.
Yeah, okay. That's very good. So when we feel stress, it blocks large parts of our neocortex. So imagine if you had only one leg and tried to run. Would you be faster, slower, or the same? Right? So the same is with the brain. It's like, imagine, like, of course it sounds ridiculous for like the leg thing, but it's the same as, like, imagine you're using just half of your brain to perceive the things, to notice the things. Also, if you remember the one of the first pictures, that actually our perceptual areas are in neocortex. So when we perceive things very, very differently under stress. So stress is the most damaging thing actually for our brain. Stress and lack of sleep. Oh, by the way, I have another seminar on how to take best care of the brain. So one is like to reduce stress. Second, get enough sleep. they usually go hand in hand. When you don't get enough sleep, we are much more likely to feel stressed, and we are much more likely to feel sadness, all kind of moods. So moods and emotions are a bit different. So moods are like kind of the states of your brain and brain chemistry, and emotions are like response about your environment. So they're kind of slightly different things. Cool. Anybody else?
What is enough sleep?
It depends. It depends from person to person. For me, 7 hours. For somebody, 6 hours. For somebody, 8.5. So it's very important to observe your own rhythms. And it also. Yes and no. You can change a little bit, but if you need 9 hours, you can't necessarily. You would be able to kind of function under 6 hours, but it wouldn't be optimal for your brain. It's the best ideal case scenario is to sleep as much as your brain needs, and to actually like kind of you can shift your sleeping rhythms a little bit in terms of so for example, I recently went to Canada, and when I went there, initially I couldn't. No, actually, hold on. We landed. It was maybe 4 a.m. already to us in the evening, and I was struggling to stay awake. And then I woke up super early after a few hours. But then after 3 days, I already adjusted. So the time we can actually slide, and our brain gets used to it. But the duration is quite fixed. But also actually, I'll finish it. The amount of sleep we need also depends on what we do. I used to, at some point, I used to cycle lots. And when I did that, I needed much more sleep. Because when we sleep, we do a few things actually. I'll elaborate on that. So first of all, our body and brain recovers and it fixes damage which was done. And I was cycling about 100 miles in the competitions. So it was 160 kilometers. And presumably a lot of damage was done to my body and brain during it. So we needed a lot of time to fix it. But secondly, actually, we process information we learned. So ideally today you should sleep a little bit more. And so when we were trying to learn something new and to change, also when we are processing a lot of emotions, when we're going through difficult times, so you should sleep a little bit more as well. So then we need a little bit more sleep. So it's important to be aware of what feels right for you. Yeah? Does you have a question?
So how do you find out how much sleep you need? How to find out if it's too much sleep or...
Okay, so if you haven't been exhausting your body tells you. So when I, for example, on the weekend, I always wake up at the same time. No matter, I can wake up whenever I want to, but I always wake up at a certain time. If you've been exhausting yourself through the week and not getting enough sleep, then it's not quite reliable method. So try to kind of observe, how much do you sleep during the weekend, and how do you feel when you sleep that amount. But again, if you like sleep, 4 hours or 5 hours at night during the week, and then 10 hours on the weekend, unfortunately, it's not optimal. Like now there is. It's thought that we don't really compensate for sleep, that the damage done is done.
I have a question about day naps.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just explain?
Day naps is amazing. It's the best.
How long?
Okay, so it depends. Usually about half an hour, up to half an hour. So the question was about naps during the day, and I know quite a few professors at University College London. That's why I did my PhD. Actually, have sofa in the office, and they just lay down for 15 minutes, half an hour. What I do, I don't take naps now because I can wake up whenever I want to in the mornings. But on the days where if I didn't get enough sleep during the night, I would do the guided meditation for 24 minutes. I just lay down, and it's deep relaxation thing. So meditating, napping, doing any kind of replenishment activities in the afternoon is a good idea. Best time actually seems to be 3 p.m. For that. That's where when you come back after lunch and you feel, we did, we missed it. Next time maybe when I give seminar we just sleep. Maybe that would be useful.
I also have a question: is day nap serving the same for adults and kids? Because the kids
a little bit different.
A little bit longer.
Yeah, so kids need to sleep for their brain to be developing. So when they develop, the new neurons are being born. If they don't sleep, that process is impaired. Well, some kids really struggle to sleep, and you know, some of them, like most of them, turn out more or less okay still. But then probably the process is delayed to the other. So it's serving different purpose. So for kids, new neurons are being born when they sleep. For adults, information is being processed, and we kind of switch off, and we replenish our neocortex. So after nap or meditation, your brain is much smarter again. Yeah?
Food and brain. There is now all the movement about superfoods and any insights from your
Very good.
experience?
Okay, so food and the brain. So I have, again, that's one of the topics on my how to take the best care of your brain. So we are getting more and more evidence that sugar is not very good for your brain, that sugar increases inflammation in your gut, and some of the brain chemicals needed for the brain are produced in the gut, or the precursors to them. So if your gut is not healthy, your brain won't be healthy. So anything that upsets your stomach, you should avoid. For me, it's lactose. Any dairy I can't have, and many people can't have dairy. And if they keep on having it, unfortunately, the gut is not healthy and the brain can't be healthy. Also gluten or wheat, bread and pasta and kolduni and whatnot. Delicious, all the pastries. I so much miss pastries, especially Lithuanian ones, those, you know, with cinnamon. Oh, so good. I can't have them, unfortunately, because I read this very interesting book on the brain inflammation. And also, if your gut is inflamed, the inflammation doesn't stay there. It moves to your body, and it can move to your brain. And it can make the brain-blood barrier leaky. So unfortunately, that can damage the brain. Now, there is one hypothesis, actually, that for people who've been celiac, so who really can't have any wheat at all, that if they keep on having wheat, they can develop schizophrenic symptoms. And that's because the actually prefrontal cortex, the blood supply is severely impaired. So then they get depressed, they get schizophrenic symptoms, and they can't really learn. So the way we eat really affects actually how our brain functions a lot. Very important is to drink enough water. Dehydration it seems, when we dehydrate, we don't produce as much blood, so not as much blood comes to your neocortex. If you lack B group vitamins, that also can affect mood, and it can affect your emotions. What else? So any intolerances, sugar. Coffee is a kind of a double-edged sword. So coffee stimulates your brain, which is pretty good, but too much coffee overstimulates, and when the brain is overstimulated, the neurons can die. So kind of being sensible with coffee or any caffeinated drinks. Anybody gets chronic migraines or headaches? Raise your hands. Okay, so I actually get chronic migraines, and I was able to resolve them nearly entirely with quitting dairy and milk products, quitting wheat, and reducing sugar, which I'm kind of a little bit, I cheat on it every now and then, but I'm now realizing that probably I need to be more serious about it. Okay, any more questions?
Question about sleep.
Yeah, go on.
Is that true that 10 p.m. is most important to go to sleep? I mean, from 10 p.m. till 2, I think, at least 4 hours.
Okay, so I've heard that too. It depends. So it depends whether you're owl or how is Vittoris in English? Yeah, early bird, basically. So I think there is majority of people actually are owls. So it depends what works for you best. I think, and in general, like a lot of advices from neuroscience are like kind of case specific, you know, like it's all these generic advices. A lot of times they work for everyone to some extent, but they are not optimal for anyone. As the same as schools, you know, nowadays. They work to some extent to all kids, but they're not the best for either. Okay, a question?
Yeah, ego. Sometimes it's an obstacle to achieve goals for me.
Yeah.
So what is that from the neurological perspective?
Achieving goals?
Yeah. Yeah, so ego. Sometimes it's an obstacle for me to reach goals, right? So
okay, can you elaborate?
Do you have any insights?
Okay, can you tell a bit more about it?
I need to think about it, but it's just in general. I need to think about the particular situation. So.
You mean about ego and neuroscience?
Yeah, I have a big problem with this.
Oh,
I
okay.
just wanted to find out what is it from the neurological perspective? What is that?
And that's a very, very good question. It's not very, it's quite a complex question. So when we have really kind of certain ideas how things should be, our ego is like the sense of self, the sense of, okay, I'm like this and things should be like this. And kind of that rigid thinking produces a lot of possibilities for inducing stress. Okay? And whenever we don't get what we expect or what we think we deserve, then actually can get in the way to truly connect with other people, to see the other things around us, and to use the most of our brain power. So much more open-minded setting works much better for the brain, because we kind of, once we create that, like kind of do you experience a lot of stress?
I do,
Yeah. So that probably it's the stress what actually gets most in the way. Also, when we have a strong ego or strong personality, a lot of times that gets in the way in forming really open and warm and close relationships with people. Again, my friend Maria, oh damn, it's being filmed. Maybe I shouldn't say, but she has really strong personality, and she keeps on saying, well, people should either take me or who cares. And she, like kind of, once she forms friends, she's amazing. She's one of my best friends, she's really loyal, really like, whenever anything happens, she'll be there for me. But a lot of people don't see through that part of her. They're not interested, to get closer, because she has like spikes all over her. And only people who are close to her, they get to see the best side of her. And probably that's the case for many people who have strong egos as well. People don't get to see the core who they are. So that's, but probably the biggest damage is being done through stress. Yeah, we could discuss a little bit more after talk if you want. Yeah.
What do you think if we would like to quit some habits? Should we do it like immediately to stop that?
Okay, to tell me example.
Step by step. For
What do you
example, like checking Facebook all day long.
Okay, perfect. So first of all, the best is actually, it depends on the habit. Some people say that to quit smoking, they prefer to quit completely. I also recently quit drinking coffee and I just quit completely. But for me, it was easy because I think I drank way too much coffee when I was in Canada. So every time I would smell coffee, I would just feel nauseous. So it was then or if you get food poisoning, it's very easy to quit food. Yeah, but another thing, there is the technique called Pomodoro technique. Pomodoro, like those, like Italian salad when it comes tomato, mozzarella, right? So actually, I apply this technique whenever I need to get anything done. It's brilliant. So what I do there, I work for 45 minutes and I can't check my emails, nor Facebook, no messages, nothing. And then I have 15 minutes, and in those 15 minutes, I do whatever I like. I can check whatever I like, I can make coffee, I can check, but only 15 minutes. I put the timer. Then again, for 45 minutes, only work, I can't check anything. And actually it really works quite well, compartmentalized that way. So dedicating the time for different things, because when we try to do everything all at once, that's the worst. And by the way, anybody likes multitasking, raise your hands. So multitasking is the biggest waste of brain power. I don't have figure readily here, but when we multitask, we don't do any of the tasks well, and we waste a lot of time switching. So there isn't such a thing as multitasking, there is a thing called switch tasking. Okay, and when we do that way, we unfortunately lose a lot of time, and we do way more mistakes. So like kind of single focus work, when, for example, if you spend time with people, spend quality time with people. If you check Facebook also. Just Facebook, don't kind of, do a million things. And that works much better. Okay? Is it okay if I keep on taking questions? Our bosses are there, yeah?
Yeah, my question is just maybe throughout your career, what examples have you seen in other companies that they apply in their companies to reduce their employee stress maybe, or how improve their effectiveness? I don't know, you've mentioned we started this with a small game and maybe something like
yeah,
examples.
So it really varies. It can't be like, so when people try to use whatever worked for other companies, it might not work for this particular company. So it's really like being aware what works. One thing which really seems to work quite universally well, actually being aware of what these people are and what they are like. So if somebody is a leader of a team or a manager, trying to get to know your team and listening, like actually being like an investigator, really trying to understand your team and applying methods based on that. If your team enjoys working individually, create space where they could have really best conditions to work that. Maybe silent rooms and maybe, that the kind of less meetings and kind of really focused work. If your team enjoys working in collaborative manner, create the best conditions for that. If the team is really have trouble with they work too much in the lab where I did PhD, like it was crazy. Like there was one guy called Arndt. He would leave the work at 7 a.m. So kind of if your team is like really constantly overworking, sooner or later that would backfire. So create conditions that actually, I heard of one lab actually where everybody needed to leave at 5 p.m. You finished your work or not, you have to leave. And the boss's idea was that if you haven't finished your work by 5 p.m., it means you don't work efficiently, right? And that's it. So he wouldn't allow, and nobody there was procrastinating because they had, plenty of time after 5 p.m. To do whatever they wanted. If in your team, on the other hand, people are not working hard enough, different techniques would work. So everything is really, really case specific. So when I do seminars or when I work with the companies, first of all, I have a couple calls to really understand what's going on there. To really we recently did a training program for Vilnius Geležinkeliai with the most senior staff of them, So we kind of had a whole day workshop where I shared some neuroscience insights, and actually half of the time we spent for them afterwards work in the groups and really discuss, okay, how of the information shared, how they can apply, and what things work and what things wouldn't work for them. And they were creating themselves a plan. And what another thing actually, a lot of times if we give people freedom, to kind of really figure out what needs for them, or if we ask them, they tell what they need or what things are missing or what things they have too much of. Okay, somebody else had a question.
Yeah, I had a question about the rewarding system. You mentioned that you should reward yourself for a bit of change you do. So what kind of reward are actually non-self-destructive? Because sugar is not a reward, as I heard.
Sugar actually is very good reward, except that for many people it doesn't work very well.
I've noticed myself that going out partying is also not a really non-self-destructive reward.
Right. Okay, write down all the things you enjoy and kind of select the ones which you think are the most constructive. It depends. For me, I really enjoy, if I've done, when I do a lot of talks, I reward myself afterwards with going for massage or going to a spa, for example. Or we go somewhere for a nice dinner. Well, that's not a reward. I go climbing. I do a lot of rock climbing. But that's for me like a habit rather than reward. So kind of, just write down a long list based on things which work for you. Because rewards are very, very individual. Yeah, and actually for somebody, if you do uninterrupted time of work, you can spend an hour on Facebook or watching telly, whatever works for you. There is no judgment around that, Actually, the time off doing the task and you kind of really switching off, whatever helps you, is okay, because your brain needs breaks. Yeah?
You have some insights how information technologies and neuroscience can cooperate to create some value for people?
Information technologies and neuroscience. What exactly do you mean?
Some automation or some value can provide some apps or something.
So there are some apps which work really well. For example, for people who are used to, there are some apps which help to change their habits. So I have one of my clients created an app called Type Lock, which works only on Mac computers, unfortunately, if you're not a Mac user. So it's designed to overcome writer's block. So there you kind of set the time you want to write for, or the number of words you want to write, and actually it switches off, you can't use anything on your computer, just that app during that time. So these apps kind of seem to work quite well to help to create the change. We can talk about it later if you want. I can't just come up with from the top of my head. Yeah, we can think about it later.
kind of an extension of this question. Have you heard of gamification? Yeah, so that kind of, how do you think that affects our brain? I mean, which parts of the brain does it reach out to?
Gamification, what exactly? I don't really know.
Well, just to,
to make things more fun and more...
things more, to gain achievements, to share some badges, to...
Yeah, okay. It works really well through it activates the reward system and it secretes dopamine. Whenever we when we play games on our computer, or if we have the apps, personal development apps, there is more and more now, emerging on the market. They work pretty well because they create this sort of reward system. Now, whether they train our brain for the right things, that's another question. Right? So when we're doing certain, there is brain training apps, for example, which they train only our brain to do specific tasks. In your brain, if you play a certain game, your brain is getting better and better for playing that game. And it's kind of just seeing whether it works for whatever you want to achieve. But making things fun in general works. Whatever fun is. For some people, using computers and apps is not the best thing. What works quite well for other people, taking a big piece of paper and using colorful pens, or like going and buying nice new notebooks and whatnot. And a lot of people, buy new diaries at the start of the year, and it helps them for a short while to stick to their plans. Making things fun is quite important because we activate parasympathetic nervous system, and our brain is actually at the best shape when we activate that system. Okay, the last question, and I think I need a little break. Yeah.
Laziness.
Okay.
How lazy is too lazy, and how much of laziness is too little?
Okay, laziness. I'm not sure if I believe in laziness, to be honest. I think we always find time, energy, and motivation to do the things we want to do. I think a lot of times laziness comes from the lack of clarity on what you want to do, or we are lazy to do things we don't want to do. As simple as that.
I mean, not laziness as a bad thing, but laziness as a good thing in terms of
like
resting, and because now people have routines filled with everything, like now I jog, now I go to a concert.
Scheduling time to relax and do whatever you want is very important. But how much is very, very individual.
But I mean, like by laziness, by like doing nothing, is this healthy?
Doing nothing is the best for the brain. Brilliant. A lot of times people ask me, like, what do you have a busy mind? Actually, to be honest, I don't. A lot of times I don't think about much. Many people don't believe it, but I think for the brain is really, really good thing. And a lot of times I even schedule a couple hours in my day to do whatever I want to do. And a lot of times I can't even name what I've done, but I feel good after. Yeah, and that's the best way to relax for the brain. Because if you're trying, some people take the quality breaks too seriously. Like, I need to meditate. Oh, it doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? So kind of scheduling at least a couple hours a day is necessary for everybody. Some people need more, and some people prefer to have less. Depends what works. But it's very, very important, yeah. Okay, so that's all for now. Actually, I have a little questionnaire, by the way. I'm doing this seminar in London on the 21st of January. I'm going to be in January in Lithuania, so I'm actually thinking if to bring the seminar to Vilnius as well. So raise your hands if you'd be interested to learn about the intelligence and talent. Are we born with it, or can we develop it? How our mindset affects the brain. There is two types of mindset: fixed mindset and growth mindset. And I delivered about this mindsets to schools, actually, to school principals, to the education sector. It's very important. And also, like, how can we change our mindset? If you have really critical mind and want to change it, if you have really busy mind and you want to change it, how can we do it? Yeah? So raise your hands if you'd be interested for that. For the 5th of January, these times. Perfect. Okay, so I still need to find the venue for it. So then I'll send you an email. I'll get your emails from your registration process, and I'll send everybody an email once that happens. There will be like a small fee ticket, about like, I think, 10 euros or something to attend it. But I'll let you know when that where that would be. Okay, so also the last thing, so thank you all for coming, and it's brilliant that you all came. If anybody wants my consultations, that's possible, and you have my contacts. You'll have my contacts at the end of the slides. You can get in touch and tell me a story. But most importantly, raise your hands if you're not from MailerLite and you came here to listen to this talk today. Okay, and how about we give a big round of applause for MailerLite to making this seminar freely available to you all. Yeah, and thank you for MailerLite for flying me in and creating the space to share my thoughts.